Hello, Chris here from Coulter's Good Earth Farm. We are in the midst of the growing season and I find myself using tools every day to do a bunch of different jobs. So I thought it might be interesting to do a quick video talking about which tools do I find myself reaching for on a regular basis. And if I was just beginning to garden, what are the only 3 tools I need? Now, the number one tool that I'm not going to mention or add to our list today is a standard pocket knife, because I use a pocket knife more than any other tool, but I'm going to use that whether I'm on the farm or off the farm. So I'm always carrying a pocket knife, so I'm not going to count that one. When we talk about gardening, there's only a few tasks that we are actually doing on a day-to-day basis, and there are 5 that I can think of. And the first one is digging or turning over the soil, that initial cultivation. Number 2 is planting. Number 3 is cultivation or weeding, cutting weeds, digging weeds, taking weeds away. Number 4 is moving soil. And number 5 is actually harvesting or even cutting things, cutting weeds down or cutting crops that you want to harvest. So if we think of these 5 things that we do on a regular basis, what tools are the best to do these things? Now, there are specialty tools that do each of these things well, but if I'm just starting out and I can only have 3, or I'm just beginning to purchase tools, or I'm new to gardening, what 3 should I get first? What are the only 3 tools I need to begin gardening and be successful with 90% of these tasks? Well, let's start with the first one that I think every gardener should begin with, and that is a soil knife. Now, this is actually not a knife per se. It does have a handle like a knife and a blade, but it's made for the soil. So it's not really sharp. It's made for digging. It's for that first job we talked about: digging, planting, and weeding. Those weeds, you can use this to cut the weeds out. You can use this to pop the weeds up. This is a handy tool that you're going to be using to prepare soil, that you're going to be using to mix soil together. Now, this is something that if you're just in raised beds or container gardening, this is probably one of the only tools you'll ever need if you're on a small scale. But even when you're on a larger scale, it's a handy tool that we find ourselves using every day. And in fact, I carry it around with me in a sheath so that I can have it, especially planting. Now, a soil knife is not much different than a digging stick. The very first farmers that took a piece of flint and whittled out a stick and used it to dig in the soil, this is essentially the same function, but it's a little bit improved, right? We have a stainless steel blade here. We have a polymer handle, and I've used this thing for years and years, and there's very little wear on it. I'm probably not going to wear this stainless steel out, so my kids and grandkids will probably still be using this tool. So it's a very handy tool for these uses. This is just a basic model. A lot of companies make these. Sometimes they're called a hori-hori knife. It's like a Japanese soil knife, but it's essentially the same thing. This is the take on it from A.M. Leonard. This distinctive orange handle comes from A.M. Leonard. It's one that has been a good one for me. I've used for years. This is their basic soil knife model. Costs $20 to $30 depending on when you buy it. They also make an improved version which costs a little bit more, and it's improved in the fact that it has a bit more serrations, and these serrations are actually very sharp, and the blade's a little bit sharper. You can actually cut yourself on that one. And then it has a little notch here that you can cut twine or small things with that. It also has some graduations here in inches, so you can check your planting depth, or you can actually use that to measure planting distances when you're putting in transplants or seeds. So there's some handy upgrades. It costs $4 or $5 more. You do have to be careful with this one because that little edge I found is really sharp, and I was used to this old one and I can grab it by the handle. It doesn't matter the way I was planning or using it. I was kind of gripping it like this, and then I switch over to this new one and I ended up cutting myself several times before I learned. But these are from A.M. Leonard. You can get these from lots of manufacturers. I would stick with quality stuff though. These are made in Italy, so they're pretty high quality. The Japanese made knives are nice. I would probably avoid anything made in China. If there's any companies that make these in the USA, it's probably going to be better steel anyway. So these are two not very expensive tools, but ones that you will find yourself reaching for year in and year out, and that are going to last a lifetime. And when you do buy these, I would recommend go ahead and getting a sheath. That way you've got a place to carry it, and you don't want to probably stick that in your pocket. It may be a little sharp for that, and a place to hang it up when you're done with it. So soil knife is the number one tool you need to garden. Number two is one of these items right here, and this is a round point shovel. It essentially performs the same functions as this, but on a larger scale. You can, it would be a little bit back-breaking for that initial ground breaking, that sod turning with this tool. So if you're talking about moving out of those beds into a normal garden bed outside on the ground, then you're probably going to need something like this to break that soil initially, or to turn over soil when you're cultivating. So this has a long handle. This is just a long handled round point shovel. It has a curved blade. You don't want a square end shovel. You want something that can dig in and cut the sod and cut soil and do that. So that's the primary task, is breaking new ground with this. Although you can plant a tree, you can plant perennials, you can divide perennials with it. And it's a lot easier on your back because you've got this long handle. So this is, they do make, of course, there are short-handled shovels for certain tasks, but you want to stay away from these unless you really like bending over or you're in a ditch. But stick with a long-handled shovel. This is also good for that other function, the fourth function I mentioned, which is moving soil. So this actually has enough capacity here where you can scoop soil, you can move compost. It's not as good for mulch, but you can, in a pinch, use it to move some mulch. Gravel works fine, sand. So this is your soil moving tool, as well as the tool you're going to use to initially break the ground. And you're going to find this very handy. It's also good for weeding. You can use it to pop out some big weeds, transplant things. So I would also recommend getting a some kind of aluminum or fiberglass handle. Most shovels you see, like this older one here, have a wooden handle, and that's fine, but they're not as strong. And then if you leave them out in the weather, the sun, the moisture can affect these. They can swell, they can shrink in the sun, they can become loose in the head. They may splinter and crack. So there's a little bit more maintenance with these. This shovel is, I think it's aluminum, and I've had this for years and years and years, and there's no issues with it whatsoever. So I would recommend go ahead and getting some kind of synthetic handle, probably aluminum. It's a lightweight shovel, it's strong, it's well made, and it's lasted me for years. So a shovel is extremely handy in the garden, and you will use this for a variety of tasks. So number two is the round point shovel. Number three is a hard rake. Now, it doesn't do a whole lot of tasks well. It only does one task really well, but that one task is pretty critical. It's I use a hard rake mostly for bed preparation. If you use your shovel to break the ground, break that up, you're going to need to create a planting bed where you can direct seed crops, or you can actually make it remove any kind of clods or rock or roots or things in the soil that's going to make planting uneven. So this is good for that, and it does a really good job. Now this is a hard rake, which means it has several tines here that you can really do a lot of hard work with and move soil and gravel. So this is for, a hard rake is for soil or rock or gravel. A soft rake, don't get it confused with the soft rake. A soft rake is for leaves and soft material, maybe hay or straw, and you'll probably use one of those, but it's not critical. You can actually move all of those things with this, just not as easy. But primarily this is for moving soil. And once again, this is an aluminum handled model. This one has been going for years. It has a slight bend because I ran over it with the truck. And if that had been a wooden handle, it would have snapped it, but it's not. So the aluminum just bent and didn't break. So I can still use this. The head's tight, and I use this for bed preparation all the time when we're preparing a new bed and planting it. You can also use it for cultivation. If there's a fine skiff of weeds on the top of the soil, I found this really works good for just scraping those off. You can also flip it on the side, make yourself a furrow, and then plant, whether you're direct seeding something like a bean or a corn, something large seeded or even small, and then flip it back over and use that to cover up your seeds. So you can actually use it for planting, you can use it for cultivation, but digging, bed preparation, that's the main use of the hard rake. So with these 3 items, you can do most of your gardening tasks. Now, starting with just these 3, you'll find out, well, maybe this one doesn't do this job as well as another tool might. But if you have those basic 3 tools, you will be able to do most of your gardening tasks and you will be completely satisfied. And then as you work with these tools, you will realize maybe the tools that you need to add on to. But if you start with these 3 basic tools, you'll be in pretty good shape. I sort of need to do a part 2 to this series because that's not all the tools I ever want to use, and that's probably not all the tools you'll ever buy. But I wanted to start with these 3 critical tools first. Part 2 of this video will be the tools that I wouldn't want to and you shouldn't do without. So all the tools that I wouldn't want to do without is next on our part 2. So hope you stay tuned for that. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit your notification bell. We don't produce that many videos. When we do, you want to know that they're posted and they're live, and you can watch them and see what's going on the farm. So we do appreciate your time. We appreciate you watching. I hope you learned a little bit from this video. So join us next time.